So you
Like
come
they'll know you're there before you even.
without a doubt.
know
Like
it.
you're not even getting a chance to see them. In that year, there was I think 74,000 tags purchased for a wolf, and only 411 were harvested.
What?
Yeah.
Did you get the news that you had cancer and that you need to start chemotherapy?
It spreads pretty fast, and I won't lie. Like I've met people and had conversations with people online who are no longer here. You know, it's scary because who knows? Maybe might not be sitting across from you today.
Calvin, I really appreciate you being here today, man. I'm big fan from what I've seen of you and the conversations we've had and the bit of banter we've had back and forth. I really appreciate what you do, what you stand for, and what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm looking forward to it, man. Thanks for coming on.
Right on. Thanks for having me. It's great to do.
Of course. So first and foremost, congrats on the mustache. I love it. You know, it's a staple. And you were telling me a bit before we dive into your whole story and whatnot. Take me through why the muzzy, why the mustache.
Well, the muzzy was actually the first thing that came back after chemo. So I got a chemo late May, and I think I started to sprout hair maybe early June, and I wasn't back on my feet until like July. So I was pretty much growing that hair, really, I guess say, for a long time, just to see how my natural hair pattern was going to be coming back after chemo. That said, compared to like the hair on my head and my beard, that came in super thick, and by September it was pretty much back to normal, maybe a little thicker, and then since then it's just kind of stuck around as a staple. It may be around for a few more months. I may trim it for, let's say, November, take it off for November.
Yeah.
Or I'm contemplating maybe eventually growing my beard back. We'll see.
Nice. I'm a big fan of the beard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, beards are sick.
That one was a 5-year beard that had to go eventually.
Yeah. That was crazy, though. If you haven't seen it, go on his social medias and find it, because it was insane.
It was my staple.
Yeah, do it for sure.
But hey, I don't mind this one now.
So, talk to me about, before we dive into it a bit more, talk to me about the Movember, right, that you were talking to me a bit off camera about before.
Sure, yeah.
Now you'd be like a staple person for Movember and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Take me through that. How that? What's that?
So basically, just through my presence online and like my advocacy for men's health issues, and I guess you say the mustache itself. I was contacted by Movember after seeing some of their posts, engaging with them and whatnot, and taking them in a lot of my, I guess say my materials that I put online to encourage men's health awareness, things of that sort. So we decided to have a simple meeting, and it kind of snowballed into a greater type of thought process or project to hopefully improve men's health by serving as, let's say, maybe a national representative or spokesperson.
That'd be cool,
So we haven't had the opportunity to go ahead and do anything just yet. This is just brand new.
Right.
And since it's Testicular Cancer Awareness Month, there's a potential where I may have the opportunity to do some speaking this month.
That'd be cool.
On different type of national campaigns. So they consider Movember as on season versus off season. So whether it's going to be November focus specifically for my type of content or not, we're still trying to iron that out specifically. But I cover so many different types of seasons and platforms, and I have a unique demographic
For sure.
that I appeal to specifically with my type of content, and we're hoping to make the best out of this as well. So I think I'm going to be maybe one of 7 unique people that'll be doing this across Canada, and depending on what the subject is, what the timeline is, and where the subject wants to be spoken about, that's where hopefully it'll be coming on in.
Amazing.
Thanks.
So take us through so we can kind of get to know a bit about you and a bit about your upbringing. Take me through kind of what your journey and transition was like leaving like high school.
Sure. Yeah. So
Start there.
I was raised in Blind River, Ontario, and down there I went to WC Eckett Secondary School. Go Royals.
Yeah, go Royals,
Yeah,
baby.
right? Small town.
I love
And
it. Yeah.
my family was spread between Elliott Lake and Blind River region primarily. After high school, I went off to Sir Sanford Fleming. I did a college diploma that turned in from a 2-year to a 3-year diploma. So I focused on environmental risk assessment, essentially environmental monitoring, and I had a 3rd-year focus on water and wastewater treatment. From there, I came up with a simple study project that ended up turning into a thesis over at Trent University. So I did an undergrad in environmental resource sciences. Focused on a thesis there with predominantly I guess a predominant focus on how effective wastewater treatment plants were at removing compounds of emerging concern from waste. And then from there...
Important stuff,
Yeah, it's huge, right?
Very.
A lot of people don't know that type of stuff. And so much of it is maybe not necessarily... Well, at that time it wasn't maybe mentioned in the media as much as it is now. And that was almost a decade ago at this time. And from there we snowballed into a master's at McGill University where I focused on integrated water resource management. So I still had a water-related focus, if you will, but I predominantly focused on both the social, the governance, and the political aspect within water management in different nations and different demographics as well. So I guess say jack of all trades, master of none, right? And I just wanted to always continue to push my understanding for different subjects and make sure I could integrate with one of them, effectively.
What was something in your studies from that time that like surprised you that you didn't know?
Ooh. All of it.
Yeah.
To think of it. During my thesis, when I was focusing on the amount of sewage that we put down through our wastewater treatment systems, and once it's all treated, it finds the environment. So everything we put down the drains, whether it's toilet, shower, sinks, the sewers on the main streets, it all finds our wastewater sewage plant.
Yeah.
And then from there we have different levels of treatment that are available, and it varies quite a bit depending on the demographic or the population, where the city is, how large the facility is as well, and the types of treatments needed for that too. And then based on my research, what I was focusing on was the presence of compounds of emerging concern. So PCBs, we're looking at heavy metals, nanoparticles, nanosilver, pharmaceuticals, things of different sorts that were finding themselves in wastewater that weren't necessarily being removed through the various treatments that we had available at that time. And there's a lot of different, multifactorial reasons for that specifically. A lot of it's associated with funding and just lack of awareness. And the reason for all these, research projects, thesis, big time, federally and provincially funded projects are aimed at towards improving the understanding how to improve these wastewater treatment plants that are removing these type of compounds to hopefully improve the downstream environments.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, so you don't really think about nanosilver ending up in your sewage.
No.
But a lot of, let's say, the gym wear, the different types of clothing, scent control, nanosilver is a very common material that they use for bacterial growth within certain garments.
Yeah.
And that said, once it's washed in our washing machines or however means of washing, it finds itself in the drain and then finds itself in the environment as well. So there's actually some research that was aimed at removing the nanosilver from raw sewage and actually refining it for commercial use.
Wow.
Yeah.
How would that look?
I couldn't tell you. At the time I was studying at Trent University, and there was a student, he was a high school student, quite the brain. I think his name was Adam Noble, if I'm not mistaken. And he was, light years ahead of his cohort at that time.
Oh, yeah.
He was focusing on removing these nanosilver particles with different forms of bacteria or funguses, if I'm not mistaken. So he was just right into it. He started a business, and I think he got a top 20 under 20, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2015.
Jeez,
yeah, and
man. Good for him.
He was around our lab, and we didn't have a lot of communication and whatnot. He was just his own type.
He was locked in, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. What made you get into that type of schooling and work originally?
Oh, well, coming from Blind River, there's not a whole lot to do, as you can imagine. Small town of maybe 3,600.
Yeah.
My family was right into the outdoors, hunting, fishing, camping, you name it, and that was always a big passion of mine growing up. Going off to post-secondary, I was 18. I stayed a fifth year in high school. I had to focus on possibly financial management or sports administration, maybe business. I was still trying to figure out my way, if you will, and I was the run to my grade. If I was going to go off to school, I was going to be 17, so I thought, it might be wise to stay back for a fifth year. And in that fifth year, since I'd already graduated, I thought it was wise to explore some of these possible trades, different types of career potentials that were more aligned with more of my genuine or general, let's say, passion and focus. And that kind of just snowballed from there. I also did a program in 2008. I worked for the Ministry of Natural Resources at the time.
Oh, interesting.
I did the Junior Ranger program, so I was stationed at Camp McChesney. And at the time I was 16, I had a blast, and I was just like, wow, I could do environmentally related work in different parts of the nation and get paid for it.
Insane.
Yeah, so that kind of changed my perspective, and even though I still applied for, let's say, the finance related route
Sure.
in my grade 12, like 2 years later, I still found myself keeping that in mind in my 5th year when I stayed back for that extra year before going off to post-secondary for the real time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Originally, I was going off to Carleton, or I applied to Carleton as well as Laurentian University.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I found myself going a 180, going off to Sir Sanford Fleming, Trent, and then McGill.
Yeah. Nice. So what ended up after McGill?
Mm-hmm.
What did you come to Sudbury? Did you get a job? Like what did that look like?
That was a unique time. So I spent about almost 5 years in Quebec itself, specifically Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
So after finished up my studies there, I was possibly thinking about maybe sticking around there just to build my career. It was something different.
Yeah.
I didn't have any family in Quebec at the time, and it was a new culture, new environment, new exposure, if you will, to my industry as well.
Very different.
Challenge was I didn't have formal writing down in French, and that opened up me obviously a risk for possibly not being employed after my post-secondary. And when you graduate with 3 different diplomas, degrees, it's a little bit demoralizing, if you will.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of the hardest times of me to really put my mind around and get through. I graduated and I was working short-term contracts with, at the time I was working with contractors who were affiliated with the United Nations. We were focusing on wastewater management systems and just surface water management, if you will, over in Vietnam, Laos, St. Kitts and Nevis, different environmental programs aimed towards improving food security.
Amazing, yeah.
And improving, let's say, health outcomes for a certain population. So I did a short stint there for maybe 4 months, and then the contract finalized, we wrapped that up, and then I was back on the job hunt again later to get a job with Denison Mines in northern Quebec, specifically maybe an hour north of Le Sarre, if you're familiar with where that is.
It's north.
Yeah, no, exactly. And
it's north.
Lower James Bay.
Okay, yeah.
So essentially, I was working as an environmental technician on a very remote site, and that town, I was in a smaller town further than that, and we had maybe 13 people up there in my small little community, and Le Sarre was maybe 25, 35 minutes away.
No Tim Hortons.
No, definitely not. And essentially, yeah, and it was a mine site closure. So it wasn't an active mine. It was already shut down. It was remediated. So basically, within environmental monitoring, we had to do different levels of, let's say, surface water, groundwater, atmospheric monitoring to ensure that the client was keeping up regulatory commitments that they had agreed to when they went through for their official permitting for the mine. And then once we finish off the mine, a lot of people think it's just cover it up and leave it.
No.
But it's almost like a 25-year process in most cases,
No,
just to ensure that it's chemically inert, it's environmentally protected, and we restore it to, let's say, the best that we can from an environmental stewardship standpoint. So up there, I was one of 5 people working this 50 square kilometer site. I was the only environmental specialist, and I was predominantly the primary anglophone. So we had in that unit, or in that area, we had a French-speaking team. So I was working as a French and English-speaking contractor. My team was predominantly French, with limited English at the time, but our client who owned the site was English. So I would serve as an intermediate to go ahead and communicate between both the client and our service workers in there. And then while up there, I really had the opportunity to lean into my passions too. So when you're driving around taking various environmental samples by yourself, isolated, no cell phone service, you're in remote. So you do that for weeks on end, and you go back to Montreal maybe on a long weekend or a holiday, if you will. You go from total isolation, total remoteness to just urbanization within a day.
That's
and it's
wild.
And it was exciting because you'd almost get burnt out by one or the other.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So, for me, coming from a small town, I naturally didn't gravitate towards cities. For me, going to a city was coming to Sudbury. going for like school shopping and stuff like
crazy,
that,
yeah.
right? I didn't probably go to, I think, Toronto until I was like probably 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah.
And coming from a small town, it's a culture shock, right?
Oh, for sure.
So
Yeah, it takes a lot out of you in a different way.
So I did one contract up there, and then afterwards I had an opportunity to come over here to Sudbury.
Interesting. Okay, so you've been in Sudbury for how long, would you say? A few years?
I believe I came in 2018.
Okay, yeah.
2017, 2018, yeah, so 8, 9
6,
years. 7, 8 years.
Yeah. Right on, okay. So what have you been doing here since, like, when, what's that time look like? Like, what's the job per se here?
Sure, so I came to Sudbury. I started working with a larger environmental consultant and engineering. They're an engineering firm. I worked for Hatch. And I served as one of their environmental representatives, specifically up here with a focus in mining. So I was there for a few years, and then a certain pandemic came along, just for lack of better words, if you will. We'll keep it short and sweet. And basically, there's an opportunity for me to find another role in a competitor, and that opened up doors for me to go up to another mine in Gogama, Ontario. So up there I focused as an environmental coordinator, so basically like almost like a field manager, if you will, where it was my responsibility to ensure construction of the mine that we were building at the time was meeting all, let's say, environmental commitments, regulatory guidelines, things that were set out in our environmental assessments given by our federal government, and managing all the field workers when it came down to scheduling the specific, monitoring that we need to do to advance construction as well.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Have you, I still want to know, have you been into hunting for like your whole life, or when did you first get into that?
Probably predominantly, like, I would say, like, my entire life. My dad had a muscle wasting disease, so he wasn't able to play like a lot of conventional sports.
A muscle what?
Muscle wasting disease, essentially, so a chronic illness.
Yeah.
It's got a word, like a name, like 3-4 words long, and it's kind of tricky.
Crazy.
But that said, he didn't have the coordination to do many of these, let's say, Canadian typical sports that you would have back in the 90s. So he focused on hunting and fishing, and my early memories with him are going down a dirt road, to our camp, going bird hunting with my brother, things like that. Spending a lot of time in the boat, and it was we weren't very hardcore in terms of crossing a lot of land because he wasn't very mobile, so we would be going, poking along, doing our own thing, and still having a hoot at the same time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Amazing. So you've been doing it kind of like forever.
Yeah, exactly. So when I went off to post-secondary, I took a bit of a hiatus just because I was so focused on my post-secondary.
Yeah, and it's not really...
It's super hard, right? You go off to school in September, hunting season starts in most cases like September 15th.
Yeah, too busy.
And,
especially in Montreal.
Oh, yeah.
It's far.
Well, yeah.
Far to go, too.
But even before then, like when I first went off to college and university, small college, there's a lot of hunters and fishers around there. But to be honest, like I wasn't familiar with hunting in these types of environments.
I see you, yeah.
Hunting up by Blind River, like it's wooded swampland. We have a lot of Canadian shield up here. So when you go down south in the lowlands, like, you're finding different types of soils, different types of trees, different types of just animals itself.
Yeah, the whole ecosystems are different.
And like, some of my classmates are right into different types of, let's say, duck hunting, turkey hunting, stuff like that. And I had no exposure to that whatsoever.
Okay.
We were just predominantly like deer, moose hunters, maybe the odd partridge here and there, but that type of hunting was our big thing.
Interesting.
And then you send it over to Montreal, and there's none of it, at all.
Yeah, no,
Different
it doesn't
focus,
seem like...
right?
Yeah, true, and especially if you're doing your master's at the same time, it's hard to...
Oh, it's... Yeah.
Damn near impossible.
Right. And then I think probably like the first year after my master's in Montreal when I was working for the mine up north was a good reminder of, I really enjoy doing these type of activities, even though like I was working at the time. I was still driving around in side-by-sides, ATVs, trucks down back roads, doing a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do to get to your environmental sites to take your samples and send them off to your lab. So it was quite a long time since I had that type of exposure, and I never went back home to do any hunting or fishing during that time. So going up north and seeing these animals with my own eyes again, in complete isolation, like it was a good reminder. I was like, okay, when you head back to Ontario, whenever that is, You should probably look into this a little bit more.
That's what. Yeah, and then when you did end up moving to Sudbury 5-6 years ago, that's or 6-7 years ago,
Yeah.
that's
Start
kept
getting
it up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When I first came back, like my goal was predominantly just establish myself, get my feet underneath me from a career perspective.
For sure.
Build up, my resume, my experience, and I want to say make a name for myself, but also be a
network a bit.
strong, let's say, representative for my company for the roles that they were trusting me with.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, as I became a little bit more advanced, a little bit more success, and had a little bit more time, I started to explore a little bit more fishing, and then that turned into a little bit more hunting again.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Definitely think too. Like there's some good spots I've pinned up in Go Gamma.
Yeah.
As well that I'm like, oh yeah, and then as the summer is gonna unfold, and that's kind of what it's gonna look like for me. But so there's a couple of things I was curious about because I had just given not this speech, but I just had this conversation, so I was very excited to like talk to you about this specific thing. Is before we get into like everything else, I really want to focus on this.
Yeah, no worries.
What are some common misconceptions people have about hunting?
Wow.
That like the general population would think versus what's actually the case.
Right.
Or what they maybe don't see or don't understand. Because I think the whole thing, while you think about that, is we struggle and everybody just wants to be understood, right? So being able to convey and give understanding to what not just so much the issues are, but maybe like the big red flags that people might see with hunting that they don't actually know.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it is probably revolved around people thinking it's just simply a blood sport, or we're out there for like sport, maybe not necessarily just harvest. I think a lot of people believe that hunters are just simply out there shooting it up, for lack of better words, and taking everything, not respecting licenses. And a lot of people probably don't necessarily understand that a lot of these populations that we're hunting have management programs associated with them as well. So every year our tags are defined based on the previous year's population counts. So whether it's a deer, moose, bear, like wolf, like all these types of critters, whether they're a prey or predator, they have different quotas that they need to be met in order for certain allocations for tags or licenses to be approved for in Ontario. I think a lot of people, like I said, believe that it's just free range, or just wherever there's a tree you can hunt as well, which certainly isn't the case, unless you have a personal parcel or private land. You're hunting crown land predominantly. And in some cases that can be a little bit frustrating because depending on, I guess, say the will of the hunter, that also dictates how remote the person will go. So typically, for me, like I like to do things virtually, like by myself, isolated. I enjoy that time, and I don't mind going the extra mile, just to ensure that I truly am alone rather than having a few other hunters near me.
Makes sense.
Excuse me.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that possibly can give people a little bit of a bad rap, or hunters specifically a bad rap, and I don't think they fully appreciate. Most hunters have just such a high level of respect when it comes down to harvesting anything, any type of game, whether it's hunting or fishing for that matter.
I think so, and that kind of stems into, whenever I think about it, I tell people, I was telling this person recently that if everybody, I implore them, whether they're interested or not, to take the hunter safety education course. Right? Because when you're on your 37-minute slide about a duck breed and how they migrate, you're going to have a different appreciation for what we have to go through, right? So I think too with that is, the way I look at it is like the animals in the ecosystem as well. There might be that ecosystem, the way it is and the way it's managed, it might only be able to sustain X amount of animals. But then there's 4 or 5 that won't have enough food. So it's like, do they all die? Like, what happens now? Right? So kind of seeing it where, and I think that's to your point, is that's how it gets managed. Is like, okay, well, there's enough for X. They're going to pass eventually. This is how we manage the ecosystem. And I think that's the best way I've heard it be articulated. And I think that sits well with me, knowing that. And then also knowing that there's a lot you have to go through to make sure that everything's balanced and that you learn how to do it safely.
Right.
And I think everybody should take a chance to do that hunter safety course, even if you don't care or you're vegan, whatever your preferences are, fine. But I implore people to do that because I think it'd be a phenomenal education for them, and it would help them to a deeper understanding that could help everybody kind of.
Yeah, for sure. And then
connect,
I think
understand it
people
more.
maybe misunderstand that certain populations just need to be managed, and in
Yeah.
some cases, like there is the ideology or philosophy that nature will manage itself at the end of the
For
day.
sure.
And like specifically, like this past year, I just was able to harvest my first wolf.
Which is crazy.
And it's a unique story by all means, but
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I did that is because I thought it would be responsible to possibly harvest one in order to maybe contribute towards improving the deer populations. So this is the first year where I hadn't, seen a deer like in the past 3 years, and I'm like, this is mind-boggling because in the past years, like, mind you, I actually haven't harvested a deer from these spots, but I've seen many of them. Like I'm seeing like probably like over a dozen within a week or whatnot, and this was the first year where I actually didn't see one. So
Weird.
I was like, exactly right. So very weird. And then across Ontario, there was almost like a common theme or a common discussion with people noticing this as well. So I took it upon myself. Hey, maybe this could be a new opportunity for me to go ahead and not just learn, engage, and understand, but also support the population in different regions as well. Because some of these keystone species that are integral for our management for these ecosystems need to be managed as well. And predators can sometimes get a bad rap just because of media, and it's one of those touchy subjects. People think a lot of these critters, they're cute and cuddly, as sometimes like movies and TV portrays, right? But trust me, like the big bad wolf is a real thing, right?
Yeah.
Same with the Yogi Bear. And so I think that's one thing to kind of understand. And when we come down to, establishing different communities or new construction projects, heck, in the industry that I work, when I'm supporting the mine development, we have to uproot the land essentially, take the trees out there, and these animals will naturally find other areas, and that also puts pressure on those new ecosystems that they invade. So in some cases, the biggest predator to wolves is wolves themselves. So they'll actually outcompete one another, and actually one pack will fight the other and vice versa.
They just kill each other off.
Exactly.
Damn.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
Speaking of which, what was your harvest like for the wolf?
In what sense?
Take me through. You said that's an interesting story. So you got me.
Yeah. So basically, coming out of chemotherapy last summer, I took it upon myself to start vlogging. I created my own YouTube channel.
I love it. Subscribe to it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And essentially, I started filming and vlogging this just in case I end up kicking the bucket from chemo. So when I got out, I finished chemo in May. I was back on my feet July 1st. And
we'll get into it after this too.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, and essentially, like, I took it upon myself to use the outdoors as a form of therapy. Yeah. And with that wolf, it was a way for me to get in the outdoors instead of ice fishing. So I still deal with quite a bit of neuropathy or nerve damage in my hands and my feet. And tying fishing line, a lot of my family and my friends know me more for fishing rather than hunting. And with the cold weather, I struggle with the dexterity and the sensation or the feeling in my fingertips. So tying swivels, tying fishing lines, switching lures, especially when your hands are wet or
Sorry
cold.
for shaking your hand today.
No,
the way I did.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
And I figured, hey, this is still the outdoors in general is just something that I almost identify with. It's such a keystone in my life. It helps me remain grounded. And if I wasn't able to go on the ice as much as I could this year, I still wanted to get into the outdoors. So I figured, how can I still do this? Should I try snowshoeing? I wasn't sure, just because it's still fairly taxing on my feet and things of that sort.
It's kind of boring.
Yeah, to each their own. I know some buddies are right into it.
Yeah, same.
And so I looked at my hunting season, and I saw that wolves were open. And I thought about trapping as well, but found out I didn't have the requirements or the understanding to do that just yet. Maybe in the future.
There's more to it, I guess.
Big time, yeah. And that said, we popped up a blind, and I just decided to take on a new endeavor just to keep my mind busy, focused, and live with intent or purpose.
Yeah. Jeez.
So it was a unique harvest. It took me about 6 weeks to figure out the wolf from start to finish, and that includes, setting up different cameras in the, in addition to like just setting out protein or bait piles.
Yeah.
So figuring out how to bait a wolf, how to strategically place a blind, what are their senses like, what are things that need to be, taken into consideration when going out hunting. And I had a good understanding of a lot of these features or some of these things that they would really rely on, like their instincts as well as like their senses, just from past like deer hunting and moose hunting. So it was a familiar territory to an extent, but still very different and something I had never experienced before. And there was a while where I started to get a little bit worried of maybe I may not be cut out for this. The wolves took about 4 weeks to find my bait pile. Yeah, no, exactly. So I probably had maybe not a true full pack, but I had many pairs of hybrids coming through. So a hybrid is basically a mix between a coyote and a wolf anyways. It's pretty, as I found out in some cases, pretty common in certain parts of Ontario. And I was having different images of males and females coming through during the winter as well, and I wanted to do something with the hides specifically that would also give me a good reminder, maybe a good pass along for whenever my time is. And that kind of like led me into the hunt. It took me, like I said, 6 weeks to figure out from start to finish, and I had a blast just to kind of learn something, try something new, especially after everything I've been through as well. It just gives me such a feeling of gratitude, appreciation, respect for, not just hunting, but the other people who are doing this type of stuff as well, whether they're cancer survivors or not.
Dude.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's an epic adventure for sure.
I have a hard time looking back and appreciating, let's say, my own journey or my struggles, and like appreciating the moments until I'm really in them. So if you check out my wolf video, like you'll see like the emotions just come on out when I start like talking about the wolf. When I'm looking at it, it's in your hands. You're looking at this, and that was the first time I'd really been up close to a wolf outside of like seeing like a hide or a pelt after processing or tanning. Yeah, so a lot of different emotions, different meanings, I guess you could say, could come from there as well. And I'm glad to hopefully do it maybe later on this year too.
Yeah. Bro, did you get a different, like, did you find harvesting the wolves, did you find you got a greater appreciation for them, like as a species?
Totally.
Yeah.
Like the amount I probably discredited at the start, or I didn't fully appreciate their knowledge or like how smart these critters are.
No kidding, eh?
We have a dog at home, 70 pounds, Great Pyrenees. Smart, loving dog, but
you're
definitely...
like, this is in the wild.
No,
Take it out at any point.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right? And she loves the cold and the outdoors and stuff like that. But then I'm thinking, compare this to one of these dogs out there, it's night and day different. Not even close. Like, and even with the hybrids, like there's different theories in terms of like how they could possibly maybe hybrid with actual like domesticated dogs as well. And just through like past integration with populations and things of that sort and migration routes. And I probably didn't pay enough respect to how intelligent and how smart these keystone species were.
In what sense was something that maybe surprised you about it? You're like, oh, these are smart animals. Mm-hmm. Just in the research process, or like once you were fully going up against them?
Basically when it's boots on the ground. Yeah. So setting up my blind, I still, hunted my predominant winds that were going to be working in my favor. So I don't want to be blowing my scent all around. I want to be as quiet as I can, even accessing the bait or accessing my blind specifically.
Wind direction?
Yeah, exactly. Just because they have super, super keen sense of smell, and they're able to pick up my scent from quite a ways away. So
they'll know you're there before you even...
Without a doubt, you're not even getting a chance to see them.
Jeez.
And in some cases, they may be curious about what your scent is, and that kind of happened to me to a certain extent, possibly, or maybe they just thought I was something else. So one morning I was walking into my blind, and I was coming in just after a snowstorm, and the winds were blowing in my direction pretty well, and we had two wolves come on up on me. And we got within probably 12 yards. I wasn't able to fire a shot. They startled me, to be honest, just because I was creeping in so slow. coming out of chemo anyways, you move a lot slower in the snow as well, right? So
imagine,
you're
yeah.
quiet, taking your time, and like I said, I'm out there for an experience, and,
Yeah.
and I enjoy it in different means, right? And these wolves, popped up out of, let's say, nowhere, if you will, and
What the?
I was like, okay, this is the real deal. How are we going to do this? And they took off pretty quick. I looked at them maybe for 2-3 seconds, and then turned around and cycled them out of there.
Come on.
Yeah, so that was my first real encounter with a wolf.
Scary. A little bit, for sure.
For this hunt specifically, I've seen them hunting before.
Yeah.
Even like this summer, when I harvested my bear, I still had wolves coming up to my bait site, even though I wasn't baiting with proteins. They were just curious about what the type of scent, and like I was pulling different animals in there as well.
Yeah.
And then that said, like seeing wolves like with my own 2 eyes, appreciating them, studying them as well, and that's one thing that I really enjoy is understanding what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how I could capitalize on that in years to come.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think doing that, to have that appreciation and understanding of those animals.
Mm-hmm.
Like my oldest brother, I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking, I'm like, I should take my oldest brother wolf hunting.
Yeah.
Because I think that's even just bare minimum for that appreciation,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's like success or fail.
Yeah.
It's still like just to understand how important these animals are and how, like you said, intelligent.
Oh,
Man, and just to like, man, getting startled by 2 wolves.
yeah.
I mean,
No,
that's
exactly.
crazy.
Yeah, and I suspect they probably thought like it was a moose. There were a lot of moose in that area
maybe,
specifically, and like
yeah.
I'd seen moose earlier that season, and then later on when I actually shot the
Yeah.
wolf the day before, I was following a cow and a calf. I walked up to them, and that was an experience too, right? You don't get a chance to see that all the time when you're on the ground, and with the snow, you're pretty silent. And so I suspect the wolves were onto me well before I picked up on them, and they probably thought I was maybe the cow and the calf bouncing around.
Okay.
Yeah, and wolf hunting is probably the hardest type of hunt that I've ever had to figure out. Sure, I'm sitting in a blind, but a lot of hours are going into it. A lot of like analysis of what the weather patterns are. So I'm looking at not just like the wind, but I'm looking at the snowfall. I'm looking at the temperatures. I'm looking at the sun. I'm looking at different things that are going to promote their activity or their behavior, right?
Yeah.
But then they also travel. In some cases, there's been like statistics around between a 3 and 6 week cycle. So they cover such a large territory, one particular pack, where it takes them some time to come back to the main area to pick up on your bait scent. So when you're setting it up, you hope that they're in the area, or they're going to be near to circling around afterwards as well. And a lot of people don't like harvest wolves. I looked at some statistics back in Idaho and I believe Montana back in 2021, and just to kind of speak towards the success of wolf hunters, in that year there was I think 74,000 tags purchased for a wolf, and only 411 were harvested.
What?
Yep. And so of those, 32 people I believe had 2 wolves or more, and that includes both hunters and trappers, so sportsmen alike, right? So that's less than 1% of tag holders were successful at harvesting a wolf. So that's less than 0.25 of 1%.
Just because you have a tag doesn't mean you're going to be successful.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whoa,
And so,
man, smart animal.
Yeah, no,
that's
big,
what it.
And their populations can boom and really overtake. And you look at the harvest rates of the wolves themselves, specifically on big game. Like there's different stats I've heard. 1 deer a week. I've also heard in some cases, like in the territories where they have big game, taking 19 big game animals per year. So if you have a pack of 8, you're looking at over 150 big game animals harvested by the pack of wolves each year, and that's just one pack of wolves, mind you, right?
Yeah.
So,
What?
yeah, and that when you start getting into the data, the statistics, it really puts in perspective that what human disruption and that what also like management of these ecosystems, populations do when it comes down to like hopefully improving like not just the stewardship or the environmental management of them,
For sure.
but specifically to go ahead and sustain them and maintain a good positive image for the hunting industry as well.
Oh man, that's cool. Jeez, that's intense. So, kind of switching gears, you mentioned chemo a couple times, and we've talked about treatment.
Yeah.
I want us to kind of dive into when did you get the news that you had cancer and that you need to start chemotherapy?
Okay.
Stuff like that.
So
the beginning of it. Sorry,
yeah.
the beginning of the cancer story.
So
talk me through it.
So this is actually my second time with cancer to an extent. I was first diagnosed in April 2023. So on March 11, 2023, I found a testicular abnormality, and I went to the doctor that same day.
Mm-hmm.
Later, to find out 5 hours after I found the mass, I was given a 98% chance that I had testicular cancer, and it was on a Saturday. So we had to do our CT scan on the Saturday. I didn't get my results until the following day, so Sunday. I was scanned, I think, at 6 p.m. on the Saturday, and that was a long night because you're going home.
Can't sleep.
No, exactly. The doctor's saying, hey, very high likelihood you have cancer. We don't know the full extent. We just know that it's definitely present.
Come on.
And your mind's going a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
And then once you get the results afterwards, on Sunday we found out that I was very localized. I had a stage 1 seminoma, so that was very local to the testicle itself. And then after we had that understanding, I basically had time to prepare to go ahead and tell my family. So my mother and my brother, and that's probably one of the hardest conversations I've had to tell them, just because cancer has been prevalent in my family as well, both at early ages and elderly ages as well. So that was one of the hardest discussions I've had to go ahead and have with mom, like from a serious standpoint. Later, about 7 months later, I started to have cancer show up again in some of my CAT scans, specifically within my lymph nodes, around my kidneys and my lower back. And then 3 months between that, 7 months, and 3 months later, 10 months after the initial finding, we had a full-blown relapse. So we had 7 new tumors growing. We had 5 in my lower back near my kidneys, and then 2 more lymph nodes present with cancer in my lower chest.
Bro.
So at that point, like,
not fun.
You don't think anything besides, like, for me anyways, like, how do we get over this? The mindset I had was just like from day one, like I got to get this done. Like I had to take it very mature, and you don't expect it to happen to you. And that was a really hard time for me to go ahead and really accept. In past passions, I used to be a bodybuilder, powerlifter, and when I actually found my cancerous mass, I was 10 weeks out from probably my last competitive season. So I had 3 bodybuilding shows lined up, possibly maybe with my last powerlifting contest, and afterwards I was going to hang it out, for lack of better words. And following that, it's been a bumpy ride. Chemo was a challenge, to say the least, for me and my family. I ended up hospitalized twice. So once we got our relapse in January of 2024, I had a month to prepare, just to kind of get everything in order. You need to figure out, lifestyle. You don't know how you're going to respond to these chemos as well. So for my chemos, I had to do 3 rounds.
Yeah.
In different healthcare systems, they have 4 rounds, but for me, it's called BEP chemo, and it's 3 drugs, and they use them at different stages within chemo. Excuse me. And essentially, there's different side effects that are apparent with each of them, and you don't really know what you're going to get hit with until it happens. So it just so happens with one of those drugs, one of the adverse side effects for me was lung toxicity. So my lungs started to shut down a little bit.
Oof.
And so I probably went from 100% function maybe down to like 80, maybe high 70s, like lung function within the first 3 weeks. And that knocked me on my butt pretty bad.
Not bad.
And I went into chemo relatively healthy still. Like a year after, I was still losing quite a bit of weight just due to lack of muscle mass being able to retain my body due to losing such amount of testosterone as well. So you lose half your natural production after surgery, and it takes some time to go ahead and rebound as well. So just as I was starting to rebound into the normal range, healthy range for my cohort, I got hit with that relapse. So that included like just getting checked out by the doctor afterwards before chemo. How do we manage these type of hormones and things of that sort to kind of give me the best outcome. So going into chemotherapy, like I said, I was in a good spot, like from an age perspective and muscle mass. So compared to the average patient,
you're a big guy.
I was a bigger guy. I'm still down about 40 pounds, and going in there, I had the highest statistics likely from a survival standpoint. So testicular cancer is very well beaten, if you will. So my initial stats I think were above 98% of survival rate, maybe 93, depends on what your
A+ roughly.
yeah, exactly.
High 90s.
Yeah, for likely beating it before we had the relapse, and then relapse I was probably in the 80s at that point if I'm not mistaken. And going into chemo, like you're checking out the other people as you're coming in for your first day, and everyone's asking you like, who are you here to see? And I come in there at the time, like I had a full head of hair, big beard, stuff like that. And then I'm like, no, I'm the patient. And they're like, whoa, okay, didn't know that. So, and you have some very surreal experiences talking with these patients too. Some of them are palliative. You don't know, everyone's story. You get a chance to connect with them, and it's life changing.
Did you connect with anybody in the hospital at that time that you can remember?
In terms of like
made an impact on you, or just had like a wild story or experience that they're going through?
Definitely. So going through chemo, I had a chance to actually speak with people who were palliative. So they're not going to beat cancer. So they will eventually fall to it, unfortunately. But they're taking treatments to go ahead and extend their life to still hopefully have meaningful impacts on people like myself.
Yeah.
And that definitely changed my perspective on understanding, what the meaning of hope is for those who still have it, right? And what, someone can do from the perspective of helping others if it's not going the best for themselves, or if they've made a mistake. What someone can learn from their perspectives or from their own experiences. I remember a few people who I've seen, and I've had some very scary moments in there as well. Like I remember the first day I went in there to see another patient who was going through a hard time, just to keep it short, and that one scared the living heck out of me, if you will. And that was the worst experience that I had. It was my first day walking in chemo. I was like, okay, buckle up, we're getting ready to go into this. And having these conversations with, ironically I had many conversations with more women than men. My type of chemo, or one of the chemo drugs that I was being administered would be administered to breast cancer patients as well.
Right.
And so sometimes they would have one particular nurse who was administering the chemo or doing the checks, try to sit all these type of people who are taking the same drugs together.
Okay,
and so I'd have the opportunity to speak with women even my age who are going through breast cancer and things of that sort, to go ahead and learn from and appreciate their journeys too.
Yeah.
So it was intense.
Man, yeah, it sounds sounds difficult.
Yeah.
Difficult to say the least.
I'm grateful to be here. Like it's and that just speaks towards like some of these conversations, even with some of the men that I was connecting to. Obviously, with where we're living at now, it's we have a rugged demographic in some populations, right? When it comes down to men, their hobbies, stuff like that. Being in a mining industry too, you get a lot of men who have a hard time talking about these type of subjects.
Very.
So going through chemo, I was seeing a lot of men with throat cancer or lung cancer, so specifically related towards either their line of practice or their career.
Like work related.
Yeah, exactly. Or smoking itself. So that was a big eye opener. I haven't touched a cigarette in my life. And seeing that, it's like, okay, it puts it in perspective. Yeah. But then also having the opportunity to talk to them about testicular cancer, because they would ask me like, oh, yeah, like that's pretty rough, and they would feel bad for me, right? And I'm like, time out, man. Like I got really good survival odds. I just got to go through the ringer of treatment.
Treatment.
Yeah. So and these guys were hunting and fishing and stuff like that. So they were seeing me, on my phone or on my laptop watching these hunting videos, and it was spring bear season at the time when I was going through treatment. So these guys were asking me questions, and they were saying like, "Hey, maybe you should give this a shot." And here I am. Damn. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
I love it.
Yeah.
So, was it more difficult? Like, which conversation was harder? Hearing that you had cancer and you had to get treated, or having to tell your family that you had cancer, which was more of a rough conversation?
Probably the latter, telling my family I had cancer. The initial diagnosis didn't come until after surgery.
Oh, fair.
So when they take my tumor, they send it off to do their assessments, and then 30 days later I have the formal understanding of what my staging is and such. So they work with the CAT scans, the screens, the blood work, and then the actual cell itself.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Exactly. So it takes about 30 days for my specific case to get those results. Understand, like, okay, from this standpoint, we understand what would be needed possibly for, let's say, chemical interventions, so like chemo, any other, let's say, ancillary drugs, or even radiation. At that time, after my initial surgery and my staging, I didn't need any of those. But then one cell is all that it takes to get free to go ahead and start spreading in your body, and that's what happened to me. So on the CAT scan, we weren't able to pick up on those cells. We just saw the tumor at that time, and we thought we were free, and it took about 7 months, like I said, to start become a little bit more prominent on scans. They weren't 100% definitive if it was cancer at that time or not. They waited 3 more months, and then during that time it had boomed. So it was like definitely cancer.
Yeah.
So during the relapse, I was a lot more cool, composed. The first time, like, when you go to the doctor and they're like, hey, you got cancer, and you're going home that Saturday night, you don't have the results coming home. And my partner, she works night shift.
Of course.
And I went home alone, and I was like, okay, this is intense. And I'm
just sitting with it by yourself.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because, like, I didn't want to go ahead and tell my family just yet. I wanted to find out the full info first.
And you want to tell them in person, like you want to tell your lady in person. You don't want to.
Exactly.
Hey, so I know you're at work.
Yeah, we were able to go ahead and speak, like, that night before, and, like, you know, have a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is the circumstance. And that definitely was something that I was super appreciative for, like, having that conversation with her. And now, 2 days later, you're having a conversation with your mom, and your brother's coming by to figure out, like, what's going on. And my mom lost a aunt or a sister, I believe, at 43, if I'm not mistaken, 41 or 43.
Early 40s.
Yeah. And that definitely is a touchy subject. She had a really tough go. Unfortunately, we got at it too late in her life, and, you know, for its staging. But she lived with us for about the last 2 months of her life, and then during that time, I was probably 12, maybe 13 at the time. So I had an early exposure to cancer, and those memories, like, were just flooding my mind at the time.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, like, okay, if this is possibly going to be me, and, like, that's an extreme, like, type of thought too at the same time. But when you're in that moment, like, you're trying to control your thoughts, and
for sure,
you know, I'm fairly good at controlling my emotions and keeping things locked down, but the mind's still racing, and then you're thinking, okay, still at that moment, how can I let my mom know about this without sending her off the deep end? And that was a very hard thing for me to kind of wrap around.
Yeah, how do you navigate that?
Oh boy.
Because you know they're gonna worry immediately.
Oh, of course, right?
Right.
And I think the big plus of all this was we had many, let's say, health associated people in my family.
Yeah.
With, or I should say, we had family members in my family that were related to the healthcare system.
Okay.
And we had a lot of strong resources to rely on in terms of
amazing,
like, understanding statistics, survival odds, what to expect, and if things go bad in terms of like treatment or even, let's say, later on down the road, then we have the resources in place to get through this.
Amazing.
So it was really like more so like providing comfort to her, saying, hey, we're going to rely on the stats. There's no need to go ahead and, for lack of a better word, say make a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah.
Even though it was pretty serious.
That's what happens
right?
sometimes. Yeah,
exactly right.
Time,
It was still serious by all means.
For sure.
And you know, you try to be empathetic too while delivering this information, but then also being strong and then confident for them.
Yeah.
Because
it's tough.
It's not easy, that's for sure.
Jeez. Did you ever wrestle with the idea of not telling
them?
the family?
No, I'm definitely.
They were gonna find out, obviously, but.
Oh yeah, but like surgery had to take place regardless.
I guess so. Yeah.
So you know, the doctors came in and said, "Hey, this got to go." And you know, the day after I spoke to my mom, I talked to her on. Actually, it was the day following. So I got my scan results the Sunday at 2 p.m. and I think I was in front of her at like 4 or 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I think Tuesday I was in front of a surgeon to figure out, okay, let's get this out. And simple procedure for just to keep it simple. And that took some time just to recover from as well.
Jeez. Hey.
But 4 weeks after that, I was back in the gym. Doctors were saying, hey, you have to get back in there. It's going to, provide a lot of health benefits. In the event that I was going to go into chemo, because at that time we didn't know what my staging was. Right. We didn't know if we needed chemo, we needed radiation. We didn't know any of that stuff. Okay. So the doctors were like, hey, you're in great shape right now. Keep training as hard as you can once you're able to retain muscle mass. Because the more muscle mass you have going into chemotherapy, the better your health outcome is.
Why?
So chemo has such a wasting effect on the body.
Yes.
And muscle will be a lot more slower to melt off the body rather than like other tissues.
Oh, like fat or anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And at that time, like I said, I was 10 weeks out from a contest.
Yeah, you're a big guy.
I didn't have a lot of body fat in my body at that time. Yeah. I was probably maybe like 8-9%, if that.
Yeah. So anything below 12 is like,
that's
crazy.
And we were probably shooting for like maybe 3 at that time.
Yeah, bonkers.
And it would be a slow process, but still. Like,
you were gonna get there. You're on track.
Yeah, for sure. And it was ironic because I went to the doctors with a clean bill of health. Mm-hmm. I had a history of blood work. I could have done some things better, like have a family doctor earlier in my life, going from province to province, school to school. Yeah. It was always very hard to kind of maintain that. Then also coming back to Sudbury, I was a little bit complacent, I won't lie, and finding a family doctor as well. I'm like, I'm young, I'm fine, I'll just rely on that and go with it, right? And, lesson learned by all means, but I was still smart in doing my own personal checks throughout those years as well. So I had everything on record and on files. And then typically for bodybuilding, I've prepped myself in the past, and I was prepping myself this time. And for about 6-8 weeks before, I tracked myself on an Excel spreadsheet, as silly as that may sound.
Love it.
So basically tracking all my metrics from like sleep, nutrition, meals, supplements, behavior, mood, training volume, training intensity,
like any health, lifestyle,
anything like amount of water you would drink, like everything down to because I start to take a standpoint of like, I'm going to assess all these variables, and if something's going wrong or there's some variable change, I need to figure out what's contributing to that and how to make it better to go ahead and appear the best that I can on stage.
Right, that makes sense.
But because I had such a good documented history, just in the past 8 weeks, I came into the doctor's office with this tumor, and they're like, your blood pressure is fine, your blood work's fine. Yeah. And it's like, well, check this out, this ain't cool. And I showed them this Excel spreadsheet, and they were like, we hadn't seen anything like this before. They're like, this is borderline like neurotic, like this is intense. And I'm like, I really want to win. Like, I'm a competitive person. I make a great second place because I want to win, but I just have the mindset of just never quitting and just keep on keeping on, like Joe Dirt says, right? It's make the best for what you can, and chasing my dreams, my passions. I love the journey itself, the process.
I think the people that don't enjoy the process get stuck in that destination. Then by the time, their whole life and mental clarity is all related around whether they succeed or fail. Yeah. And then they try to justify it in their head if they failed, or when they fail, or if they fail, it's like, well, I achieved all this. Looking back on it, it's like, but why are you still so, why is that? Why are you letting the fail or success dictate? Right? And it's like you graduate and then there's a lull. Yeah. You're like, oh man, it's like you work really hard for something just to not achieve it, or once it's achieved, you're like, okay, well now what?
Yeah, well, like, exactly.
You didn't enjoy the process.
And through my history with like competitions and things like that sort, I didn't compete as much as I probably should have. I would love the process of getting ready for something, but I hated show day. I hated contest day. Yeah. It didn't have as much meaning to me as the journey did building up to that.
Why is that, you reckon?
I think for me, I probably am just in the mindset of I love challenge. I just love... Well, when I was younger, I probably had a difficult time accepting failure, but I also appreciated the lessons and the understandings I got from failing so many things.
I see, yeah.
And then you find out the more things you fail, the more lessons you learn.
That makes sense.
And the more you're able to improve and have a better outcome or output for whatever you're able to do. Not everyone has that mindset, But if you're able to lock that down and apply it to different aspects, whether it's your passions, your lifestyle, your relationships, you name it, I think it really sets you up to do great things in your life. And that's kind of like what I've always tried to do or aim to do with my energies and focus.
How are you trying to do that right now?
Helping men.
Yeah.
Men and women, to be honest.
Nice. I think you could do both, and in turn, we were talking about it before, but I had the idea then I think in turn helping men, you also help women, but you could also refer to women to how to help men in certain scenarios, right? I think you can't have one without the other.
Right, no, exactly. And for me right now, obviously, testicular cancer is no joke. That's kind of like one of the big things I like to say. It'll hit you when you least expect it. I never saw this coming in a million years. And if I didn't take action that day, who knows what today would have looked like.
Yeah.
We're 2 years after being diagnosed with cancer, after going to the doctor, literally the same day I found it. And the average guy goes to the doctor after finding a testicular abnormality 5.5 months after the first day he finds it.
You went like immediately.
I went the same day. Yeah. I saw a doctor within 5 hours, and these guys are waiting 5 months.
Unheard of.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
It spreads pretty fast, and it's scary because I won't lie. Like, I've met people and had conversations with people online who are no longer here. I know people who were diagnosed pretty much almost like the same day as I was, and I was diagnosed in March, and these people passed in September.
Because they waited.
Exactly.
Come on.
So that was a very big eye-opener, and I think that started to kind of put wheels in motion or give me the thought of what can I do for other people to prevent these type of circumstances that happen to this individual.
Right.
And it's scary, to kind of think of that as well, because there's also an aspect of like vulnerability with the stuff that I had to do and overcome, and there were different challenges that I had to overcome in life to overcome this one specifically, and I like to take that thought in terms of like just preparing for the next challenge. Yeah. So if I could help other people prepare for similar challenges, whether it's cancer related or not, I think the mindset definitely can serve a lot of different people in different ways or ways that they see fit. So whether you're a male or female, I think there can be a lot of common themes that can be taken from my journey specifically.
Oh, I think so.
I think I live with passion, purpose, intent, and I also speak towards like persistence, right? Being positive. It always hasn't been easy. You get scared, right?
It's tough, yeah.
But after this second bout of cancer, I've definitely taken the approach of looking at the glass as half full than half empty. And what I'm hoping to do now is inspire different individuals who I may identify a little bit more, people who can relate to my journey,
for sure,
my background, my culture, if you will, and my passions, that struggle with acknowledging some of these health issues as well. Because, like we mentioned at the start, I'm partnering with Movember now to reach a unique demographic, and a lot of these national large-scale campaigns, they do a great job at increasing awareness across the board, but unfortunately sometimes they don't make it to these demographics or populations that don't have either accessibility, they're not aware of it. And if I could be an individual that could encourage these type of messages or help get these messages out to these people, there's a better chance that they're going to understand them and take action when they need to.
Right. So, ultimately leading to higher survival rate.
Exactly. Better health outcomes across the board.
Yeah. Should be phenomenal.
And in some of the industries that I'm affiliated with too, like, don't lie, there's a significant, like, I won't lie, there's a lot of male ego, if you will.
Yeah, a lot of stubborn men.
Yeah. And I don't want to say, like, toxic masculinity, we've heard that trait before, but nobody's talking about their balls. Let's call it what it is, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're on the sports team, you're in a mine with miners, you're in the gym, like, no one's talking about these issues. Mind you, we have so much awareness, so many conversations around, I like to say almost a female equivalent, breast cancer.
Yeah.
Right?
Huge.
But we have an issue or a stigma associated with testicular cancer. No one wants to talk about the checks that are needed.
Yeah.
Mind you, the women in my life talk openly about, you know, the mammograms, the checks, the things that they do to ensure that they're going to be able to live a longer, healthier life.
Yeah.
And if something goes wrong, they could hopefully get on top of it before it gets out of hand. And testicular cancer, yeah, like I said, it has a high survival rate, but if you let it go, it's an aggressive spreading cancer as well that requires like an intense chemotherapy treatment.
For sure. The thing too I found with it's a very, very sensitive issue for men, right? Regardless of who you are. I think no matter what, you said it too earlier, like we'll use the word vulnerable as well, right? It's very, very like tough for most men, if not all, to have those discussions. Yeah. And so I think being that beacon that people can look for and be able to connect with, who's like, he took right away, and it helped him in terms of his survival. You know, it helped him with lifestyle and like his lifestyle being, and like also even before being diagnosed, having that healthy lifestyle and being focused on, you know, having good sleep, having good health, like building muscle and stuff like that, being able to go, these are the pillars that I had in place before. Right. And then this is why it helped, that paired with catching it early. Yep. Dude.
Well, exactly.
You like it upped it.
A few people have asked me, like, how could this happen to you?
Fair. Yeah.
It's a surreal thing to kind of think about, too. Sometimes I have a hard time believing how could I have not caused this just with the amount of strain and stress I put on my body. I was a very type A individual, go, work-related. You know, the intensity that I brought into bodybuilding, I brought into my lifestyle as well as my career as well. I was a very driven and motivated individual, and if there was a wall, I'd probably run right through it. I was just headstrong. So if I can kind of reframe, you know, my life to help other people that can learn from my experience, I think that's going to be huge. It's wild knowing that this happens to people who do all the proper health procedures. Like I said, I exercised, I never smoked. I wasn't a big drinker by any means. I was the health nut in my family, like on both sides. Yeah. And ironically, in my family, those who kind of were the health nuts were the individuals who actually got cancer.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, it's hard to believe.
Yeah. So, kind of summing everything up, I know we talked about a bunch of different things. Sure. Do you have kind of like a final message or important thing you want to highlight? It can be like a story, it could be like an example, it could be just something you want to share. Ooh. To kind of not just so much conclude and round out the episode, but like just, you know, make sure you hit the nail on the head for this.
For sure. And you know, that's probably almost a full podcast in itself, and I'm open to coming back and talking more about that.
Yeah, for sure.
High level, I would say, like, when things go wrong, get checked. That was I think one of the biggest benefits that I did just for my better outcome. Yeah. If I didn't accept what was happening in that situation, who knows? Maybe I might not be sitting across from you today. I think a lot of people still hear me, but they don't necessarily appreciate or fully understand the message that I'm trying to get out. Right. And like, for example, I have close friends and close family members who still haven't, you know, taken the proper health, let's say, changes in their lifestyles that are needed, right? And it's upsetting too at the same time, but it also speaks towards, you know, what needs to be done. What could I do better for other individuals? Yeah. How can I help more people? Cancer's no joke. When something goes wrong, get checked out. And, you know, I'll also say, like, having a documented health history, whether it's a physical, blood work, a yearly inspection. Like, we put our vehicles in the shop every year for a yearly service, and you know, if we're using it more or we're doing XYZ with them
3 times a year,
right? No, exactly.
Beginning end every twice a year, beginning end of every season. Yeah,
right. Crazy. And that said, like, people still don't do this stuff for their own health, and just because you're young, don't think it's gonna happen, right? And I empathize with families who maybe, let's say, not as fortunate as others. I had a really unique experience in chemotherapy, seeing a few people who unfortunately were in a compromised situation. You know, for example, you know, a single parent household dealing with testicular cancer, and no father in the picture. So think of like that type of individual, that child in high school dealing with testicular cancer, possibly not even sexually active at that time, not knowing how to approach mom about this type of situation. And like, there's just so many messages that I could possibly get out there.
It's freaky.
That really hit home. And until you see it yourself, or learn about these, or have these conversations with other cancer warriors, it's surreal. And to an extent, I could almost say like perhaps cancer could be one of the best things that's happened to me in my life, because it's completely changed my perspective and an outcome on where I want to take my life. And I specifically say outcome in that standpoint because my life will never be the same, and where I guarantee wherever I end up after this will be way different than what it would have been if I didn't get cancer. And I think it's going to be in a much better place. I'm going to be able to help a lot more people and hopefully have a more meaningful life as well.
Amazing.
Thanks.
Where before I conclude, where can people hear more from you? Where can people reach out and connect with you? How do people get a hold of you?
Sure, yeah. So I'm available on different types of media platforms. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram. I have a Twitter account. I may consider TikTok, but predominantly most of my content's put on YouTube.
Yep.
So feel free to go ahead and subscribe. All my handles are just my name at Calvin Crispo.
I'll definitely link them anyway.
Appreciate that.
Of course.
And it's interesting to find out on these different platforms, I have the chance to connect with different demographics. So Facebook's a lot more the elderly or middle-aged community. Instagram's a lot more younger. So I bounce around quite a bit, and I provide information to different types of groups depending on who's engaging and what my metrics are saying on the backside of things. So trying to take a different type of approach to helping people of all ages and those who get kind of learn from my story and make a better outcome for themselves.
Incredible.
Right on.
So I'm really grateful you were able to share your story with me today, brother. I'm excited I got to meet you, and I get to keep watching your videos and subscribing and seeing what you're doing, and I look forward to seeing how it all develops and how you help as many people as you can. And I'm just grateful you were able to sit down with me today, brother. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Really appreciate it. You
Awesome.
ran a great show. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. That's it. That is a wrap.
Cool.
Oh, how you feeling?